Star Wars 7x7 episode 2014. Today, we have a moment to get back to our series of looks at what's upcoming in Star Wars for 2020. Today, we're going to focus on the book situation and also talk about what is notably absent from the announcements so far. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. So, unless I'm terribly mistaken, this is our fourth in a series of looks at Star Wars storytelling for 2020. We've already talked about movies and live action and animation. Now we're getting into books. We still have a couple of others to do, which we will get to in time, all in good time. But today we have books on the agenda, and we'll talk about the books coming out in chronological order in 2020, at least the ones that have been announced so far. Starting with R2-D2 is Lost, which comes out in February. And it is a children's book, but I will remind you that the whole business of, whether it's children's books or, any other Star Wars storytelling, either Pablo Hidalgo or Leland Chee had said the whole business of canon has to do with whether one storyteller has to take into account another story in terms of their own storytelling planning. So, that's what canon is about. And we already know, based on the publisher's description of this, that BB-8 at some point goes to Endor. So I find that kind of fascinating in its own right. And I will say kudos to the publicity person, whoever it is, who wrote this line. It says, "The droids are in for an Endorable adventure." Haha! Well played. Very good wordplay in that regard. And from there we get into more adult stuff. The Rise of Skywalker Expanded Edition novel by Ray Carson will be coming out on March 3rd, and then the Junior Novel Edition by Michael Kogge, K-O-G-G-E. That comes out on March 21st. Then we get into May, and not quite on Star Wars Day, May the 4th, but just one day later on May the 5th, we're getting not one, but two novels, one adult and one young adult. The first one, the adult novel, I don't know if it's necessarily first, but the first one we're going to mention here is Chaos Rising. It is the first in a new trilogy by Timothy Zahn, and it is the Ascendancy trilogy. It's about Grand Admiral Thrawn, naturally, and so here is what we have about it already. It says, the first book in a new trilogy set before Thrawn traveled to the Empire and became a Grand Admiral. You journey to the unknown regions and learn more about Thrawn's origins and his home, the Chiss Ascendancy. Also coming out on the same day is a novel by E.K. Johnston called Queen's Peril, and this is a prequel to Queen's Shadow. It is set before the events of The Force Awakens, listen to me, The Phantom Menace. I think that's twice in 2 episodes I've done that now. Oh, goodness. But it does sound like it's actually going to then bleed into the events of The Phantom Menace. Here's the official description on that one. When 14-year-old Padme Naberrie wins the election for Queen of Naboo, she adopts the name Amidala and leaves her family to rule from the royal palace. To keep her safe and secure, she'll need a group of skilled handmaidens who can be her assistants, confidants, defenders, and decoys. Each girl is selected for her particular talents, but it will be up to Padme to unite them as a group. When Naboo is invaded by forces of the Trade Federation, Queen Amidala and her handmaidens will face the greatest test of themselves and of each other. That's why I think it's going to bleed into the events of The Phantom Menace, even though the publisher's description says it takes place before The Phantom Menace. Then on June 23rd, we have the hotly awaited sequel to Alphabet Squadron. It is called Shadowfall, and here is the publisher's description on that one. After their narrow victory over Shadow Wing, Alphabet Squadron is on the attack, hunting their adversaries within the Imperial Remnant. Shadow Wing is desperate for direction and leadership, and they find both in the iron will of Major Keyes, their former commander, and Irika Quell's one-time mentor. As battle lines blur, Alphabet Squadron finds itself not only fighting their resurgent foes, but their leader's own deadly shadow. And I will remind you that Hera Syndulla appeared in the original Alphabet Squadron novel, so it would be very cool to have more of Hera and potentially other folks from the Spectre Cell involved in this novel. That's fingers crossed. We don't have any announcements about any of those characters just yet, but hey, we saw at least one in Alphabet Squadron, so let's hold out for a little more involvement there too. The next books then go back to younger readers, if you will, or at least are more targeted toward younger readers. First off, Dark Legends on July 28th. Read on if you dare, according to the publisher's summary. This unique in-world collection hallows the spooky tales and ghost stories that would have kept Luke and Leia up at night. Created by George Mann and Grant Griffin, the same team behind the stunning Star Wars myths and fables, these 6 frightful fables have been carefully woven from the expansive fabric that is the Star Wars galaxy, including the thrilling landscape from Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland and Disney World, and beautifully painted in a lush, illustrative style that feels intergalactic yet innately archetypal and timeless, which sounds very cool. And then after that is the Clone Wars anthology, which is coming on August 25th. It's an upcoming short story collection written by Lou Anders, Tom Engelberger, Preeti Chibber, Zoraida Cordova, Jason Fry, Yoon-Ha Lee, Rebecca Roanhorse, Anne Ursu, and Greg Van Eekhout. And apologies if I've mispronounced any of those. Each story that is in this collection will adapt a story arc or episode from the Clone Wars from the point of view of one specific character. And that actually leads me into my next topic, which is one novel that I particularly hope will be happening, or one short story collection I hope will be happening that hasn't yet been announced. And while I'm at it, we'll also talk about what hasn't been announced very notably at this point. We'll do that right after the break. Stay tuned. Hey Rebel Rouser, I've made some changes to the asteroid belt level at patreon.com/SW7X7, and they are all with sponsors in mind. So if you want to get the word out about your business, your product, your service to a dedicated Star Wars audience, then please check out patreon.com/SW7X7 and look for the asteroid belt level for details. Again, that's patreon.com/SW7X7. Welcome back. So speaking of stories told from the point of view of certain characters, this is the 40th anniversary year of The Empire Strikes Back, and as you'll recall, during the 40th anniversary year for Star Wars, we got a short story collection called From a Certain Point of View, which told the story of Star Wars from the points of view of a lot of minor characters all throughout, the whole story of Star Wars itself. So I'm certainly hoping that they do a similar short story collection related to The Empire Strikes Back. Hasn't been announced yet, don't know if it's going to happen, but I think that would be really cool. And the other thing for which we don't have any announcements yet on titles or anything like that is anything related to Project Luminous. We know that Disney Lucasfilm Press and Del Rey will be involved in this project, but there's been no announcement as far as what those books are going to be or when they're going to come out. That being said, there isn't anything on the release calendar after the Clone Wars anthology in August, and I would be remiss in not pointing out that Star Wars Celebration Anaheim is happening in August of 2020, so it seems like, barring any announcements on May the 4th, for example, that would be a great time to finally reveal Project Luminous and tell the whole world what this whole thing is going to be about. So either May the 4th or Star Wars Celebration Anaheim, those seem like great dates to make those kind of announcements. Just saying. But that is pretty much what we've got on the books right now, no pun intended, for Star Wars storytelling, fiction storytelling in 2020 so far. And that is going to do it for this episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2020 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.